hearing of the Senate Committee on Insurance and Small Business. We're calling it to order. I would like to welcome everybody. This is our first hearing of the new session. I would ask the clerk to take the roll.
Senator Golskowski. Here. Senator Hutton.
Here.
Senator Jagler.
Here.
Senator Taylor. Senator Bath.
Here.
So once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to the first hearing of the Committee on Insurance and Small Business. And I'm going to start off by having the senators as well as myself introduce themselves, give us a little bit of their background. I'm State Senator Mary Golskowski, and I've been an independent insurance agent for the last 40+ years. I own my own agency. That's what I do when I'm not down here. With that, Senator Hutton.
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to follow that, but I'm the newbie in the Senate, private sector business owner representing the 5th Senate District, Brookfield, portions of Warwick, Dallas, and New Orleans. Those are Washington, hopefully serving in this committee, also chairing University at Revenue. Good to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Senator Jagler.
Hi, Senator Jagler from the 13th Senate District. I live in Watertown. The district basically runs north of the interstate from Oconomowoc all the way. I'm a rare breed. I'm a Dane County Republican representing DeForest and other communities in Dane County. It runs along that stretch. I'm the chair of the Education Committee.
Thank you, Senator Bath.
I'm Brad Paff. I represent the beautiful Driftless region of La Crosse, Vernon, Crawford, and southern Monroe counties. I'm a farm boy. I was raised on a family dairy farm in northern La Crosse County. My family's been farming in that area since they first came to this country in the mid 1800s. Agriculture is near and dear to my heart. I've had the opportunity to do agriculture public policy most of my career. This is my first term in the state Senate. This is my first committee hearing in this insurance committee, and I want to thank the chairwoman for holding this hearing, and thank you for your gracious hospitality.
Senator Taylor, do you have your phone? Well, we'll hold off until Lena gets there. We'd also very lucky to have our alleged counsel attorney here to help us through everything today, Margie Kelly. She will be staffing our committee for this session along with Scott Gross. Our first item of business and our only item of business today is a public hearing on the confirmation of OCI Commissioner designee Nathan Houdek. If anyone wishes to register or testify in support or opposition, you can do so at one of the registration stations out in the hallway. If you've never done that before, we've got our sergeant staff, and they can help you navigate that. Now, everyone in the room could please mute their cell phones. We'll get this going, and I would like to call up Nathan Houdek, who has been appointed by the governor to serve as Commissioner of the Office of Commissioner of Insurance to serve for a term ending at the pleasure of the governor. Welcome, Commissioner designee.
Thank you, Chair Golskowski, members of the committee. Appreciate the invitation to be here today. Start off just saying I'm a little nervous, mostly because it's Groundhog Day. And just worried I'm going to keep repeating this day over and over. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Anyway, my name is Nathan Houdek. I had the privilege of being appointed Commissioner of Insurance by the governor in January of 2022. I was honored to be reappointed in that role earlier this year. I'd like to start by providing a little bit of background about myself. I was born and raised in northern Wisconsin. I grew up in the small town of Phillips in Price County. And other than a short time working at a ski resort in Colorado in my early 20s, I've spent my entire life in Wisconsin. And from a young age, my parents taught me the importance of community involvement and public service. And they're both still active in local government today in their retirement years. My father still serves as the chairman of the township where he lives, and he's on the board of directors for the Wisconsin Towns Association. And my mother is on the Price County Board of Supervisors. So I moved to Madison for college, and shortly after moving here, I started interning in the Capitol office for my hometown state representative, and also working as a page in the state assembly. And since that time, I've had the opportunity to work in a variety of roles, really in and around Wisconsin state government. I worked as an aide in both the state assembly, state senate. I worked in private sector government relations for a few years. And that experience has really taught me a lot about the importance of working together with people across the political spectrum and really focusing on finding common ground to get things done. I think too often we're not focused on getting things done and too often focused on ideology. The last 4 years serving as commissioner and deputy commissioner have really reinforced the importance of OCI's role as the primary regulator of insurance for me. Ensuring that consumers are protected, maintaining a fair regulatory environment that ensures financial stability, and promoting competition and innovation in the industry is really at the core of everything that OCI does. And as you know, Wisconsin has had a long tradition of being a well-regulated insurance market. And that approach has helped make Wisconsin an attractive market for incumbents and new companies. And it's really benefited both consumers and our overall economy. And in fact, Wisconsin is one of the top 5 states in the nation for both the number of domestic companies and the total number of companies that are licensed to do business here. We're fortunate to have over 2,000 insurers doing business in the state, including more than 320 companies that are domiciled here. We also have over 200,000 licensed agents, approximately 35,000 of which are state residents. And over the past few years, the insurance industry has continued to grow at a rapid pace in Wisconsin. Additionally, we've had new regulatory filing requirements, and the complexity of those filings, along with new state and federal laws, have really increased our agency's workload and regulatory scope. And I won't go into extensive details about the numbers of the industry growth and the details of those new laws, but that information is included in the written testimony in front of you. And there is a 2-pager also that provides some charts that highlight those numbers. And we can talk about that obviously more when I'm finished with the testimony here. So I'll just close by saying that at OCI, we take our regulatory responsibilities very seriously, and we remain committed to protecting the strong and competitive insurance market that we have in Wisconsin. We also remain committed to working with our industry stakeholders to ensure that consumers are protected and educated, and that the Wisconsin insurance market remains attractive to incumbents and new companies for the long term. So I will end my remarks there. Again, really appreciate the invitation to be here and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Ethan, I'm gonna say thank you for coming in and testifying in front of the committee, but I'm gonna make you repeat a little bit here. I think that OCI is, one of those agencies that totally flies under the radar because we don't hear about you guys a lot. DSPS, health services, DNR, we're all in the news all the time for whatever reasons, good and bad. But OCI, I can't tell you, nobody, we're not talking about OCI over here. Let's put it that way. But I think you play a really important role. And you mentioned we have 320 insurance companies in the state. Can you talk a little bit about, like, when you talk about the regulatory aspect, it's not just consumer protection, but OCI plays a very important role for our domestic insurers when it comes to their audits and their financials. And if you're not doing your job, then you're subject to other states' regulation. So why don't you explain that a little bit?
Sure, and I'll take a step back even. So, insurance is unique in the financial services sector in that it's a state-based regulatory system. And the states are the primary regulators for the insurance industry. And that's why it's really critical for states to have a good regulatory environment and for state insurance departments to have people who know what they're doing and people who really take their job seriously. And we've been fortunate in Wisconsin to have both. And what that really means is, we have 2 core functions at OCI. One is really focused on financial regulation, and that's ensuring the companies remain solvent for the long term. So when they sell an insurance policy, our team is there to make sure that that company remains financially solvent so they can pay claims into the future. And then the other piece is market regulation. So it's really about, that's where our agent licensing, consumer affairs, if there's any kind of market violations, state law, state rules, it's our market regulation people that would take action to address that. And because of the state-based regulatory system, there's really no backstop. So if we get something wrong, if we miss an evolving financial problem with a company that turns into something severe where a company has to be put into rehabilitation or even liquidation, that's going to have a very negative impact on the policyholders for that company. And similarly, if we miss something with regard to how an agent is acting or how a company is marketing or something with regard to market regulatory activity, that's going to be problematic as well for consumers. So it's really important that we, our staff stays up to speed on what the latest kind of regulatory rules and requirements are. And then we have, like I said, we have people who know what they're doing. That's at the end of the day, everything we do comes back to our team's ability to be able to do this financial solvency and market regulatory oversight work and do it effectively.
So I'm gonna ask you to expand on that just a little bit, because one of my largest employers, Church Mutual, is my best employers. We thank you for being here. But Church Mutual operates in many different states. So when you do their financials in the state, then you can pass that on to other states. Is that correct? And if you don't have it and you don't get it done timely, then Church Mutual is subject to being financially scrutinized by all the states, which is very expensive to them. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, and that's when we say, state of domicile. So ensure, that does business in many different states. They have one state that does the state of domicile. And that state is responsible, has the primary responsibility for the financial oversight for the company. And this is where we haven't gotten into the NAIC accreditation, but it's important that our agency continues to be accredited, maintain accreditation with NAIC, because that's essentially a stamp of approval that when we do that regulatory work for our domiciled companies, that other states can trust the work we do. And if we lose that accreditation, which we could do if we aren't meeting the requirements, if we aren't reviewing and approving or disapproving certain filings within a certain time frame, all those things jeopardize our accreditation, which then sends a message to our domestic companies that they might not want to be based here anymore. Can they really trust that we are seen by our peers as being competent to be the primary regulators of a big, multi-state company?
So I'm going to turn it over to some of the other senators. Questions for Ethan? Senator Jaegler.
Thank you very much for being here. Cybersecurity, I know your role is to oversee the programs that the insurance companies have to that end. Where are we in Wisconsin? How are our companies doing? Do you feel like we're ahead of the game? Are we compared to other states, or where are we at when it comes to the vulnerabilities and warding them off?
So the NAIC developed, National Association of Insurance Commissioners developed a cybersecurity model law. And when that happens, then it's up to the states to enact that law, go through the full legislative process. So as you know, we did that, I think 2 years ago. I think it was last November was when companies were first required to submit to us their information security report, essentially outlining, what's their internal protocol and governance and what are they doing to protect their data. So they submit that to us, and then annually going forward, they have to verify that that program is updated and they're monitoring it. And then the other piece of that is, in the event of a cyber breach, there are notification requirements. So the company would have to notify our office within a certain amount of time, and also notify policyholders and any other relevant regulators. So I think since the end of 2021, we've had 31 breaches that we've responded to. And that's something that, is when I talk about increased workload and regulatory scope, our staff is now responsible when we get contacted by a company. We have to work with that company. Sometimes it can take weeks to make sure that, everything that needs to be done following a cyber breach is done from our standpoint, and that they've met the protocols that they've laid out in their information security program.
Okay. One other question. You mentioned it's Groundhog Day, so supposedly we're going to be cold and uneventful. But when it comes to emergency preparedness, obviously there's a lot of reach out with many state agencies involved. How has that gone so far in your time in this position to be prepared for, an inevitability of something bad happening to other ones?
Yeah, and we do communicate with WEM, Wisconsin Emergency Management. We typically, our approach is to try to get the word out anytime a flood hits a certain area or a storm hits an area. We try to communicate to that area as quickly as possible to let people who are impacted by that weather event know what they should do in terms of, filing a claim, contacting their agent, that type of thing. So we really see we're not really the boots on the ground people, but we're more there to provide information and help people know in that time of crisis who they should turn to and what they need to do.
Senator Beck? Senator Hutton, questions for Nathan? So I'm gonna
Nothing at this point.
okay,
Improvement.
so last session, we also passed the pharmacy benefit manager legislation. And your office was given oversight of that. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it's been going?
And so when it first went into effect, we did see a number of contacts coming to our office, filing complaints with the new law. The more we looked into those contacts, we realized that the way the law was written, there was no jurisdiction for us to take action based on what the complaint was being filed. On top of that, there is the, as you know, the annual transparency reports have to be filed by PBMs. Because of our staff shortage in our market regulation area, we had wanted to do a more in-depth analysis of those reports to see, are there problems, to really understand, frankly, to understand how PBMs operate. Because part of our challenge with the new PBM law is that's a brand new legal entity for us. We regulate insurance companies and agents, and PBMs are a whole different animal, a whole different business structure. And part of the challenge we've had is not having additional staff to enact and administer that law. We just haven't had anyone who's been able to really dive in and understand where are there places where in those transparency reports there might be some red flags, or there might be some regulatory issues that we would want to follow up on. So to be frank, our approach so far has been passive in terms of we encourage people, if you have any complaints, contact our office. We'll respond, we'll do everything we can to look at our authority within the scope of the law, but we haven't been able to do the more kind of proactive regulatory look that we would like to.
So for the next few years, where do you see OCI going, and how do you want to drive this ship? Like what do you think perfect OCI would look like in Europe?
Well, what we're really focused on in the short term is making sure that we have the staff resources and the IT resources to be able to fulfill our regulatory responsibilities in the modern era. You know, there's kind of two sides of this. One, we are trying to modernize how we operate. You know, I think was it 2 or 3 years ago, we transferred all of our financial filings to electronic. Prior to that, prior to like 2021, everything was still coming in paper. We literally get boxes of paper just delivered to the office, and burdensome to go through all of that and to store it and everything. So we invested in a new financial filing system, which has been great. But we feel like it's just the first step in kind of a multi-step process of really modernizing the agency overall, which we think will be beneficial for companies. It's not, nobody wants to use paper all the time. And for us internally too, we've been able to reduce some of that staff review time because we can use computer systems to do some of the review. So we definitely want to continue to modernize how our operations are running. And then on the other side, making sure that we have the efficient staff that we need to fulfill the new responsibilities that we have. So as I mentioned with the NAIC accreditation, there are regularly new filing requirements and new model laws that are being developed through the NAIC process, not all of which are accreditation requirements, very few are. But the ones that are typically fall on the financial regulatory side of the house, and they add in a lot of additional staff time because these filings are just becoming more and more complex. They take a lot more time to review, to fully understand. And as we move to more of a risk-focused analysis of how we do financial examinations, we find that it's more effective in terms of finding problems earlier in the process, which is what we try to do. Identify early identification and action when we see a potentially financially troubled company, and these new requirements and these new methods of conducting exams are working in that regard. But they take more training, they take more staff time. So there's that piece of it. And then there's also all these new laws that are being put in place, which As I mentioned in my testimony, we're supportive of. We think the cybersecurity law, the PBM law, the annuity best interest law, these are positive. We think they're good for consumers. Licensure of public adjusters, we now have 176 licensed adjusters in the state, all good things. The problem is, as we've gotten more and more of this work put on the agency, and as more and more of our financial team is having more and more work put on them with the increased complexity of the filings and the growth of the industry, it's really putting a strain on our ability to do this new work, let alone our core functions, and maintain kind of the well-regulated market that we aim to have here.
So I'm gonna give you an opportunity now. I want you to like do a shout out for OCI and all the good things that happen in the state. If I go into how it's OCI funded, and then regulatory finances and then the rounds.
So it is entirely industry funded, and it's a mix of premium taxes are the big one. I won't get into all the details of how everything flows through, but it's premium taxes, it's licensing fees, it's a lot of different fees for different entities, agents, etc. to be licensed. There's a small amount for like fire department dues, but that goes right to the fire departments. But the bottom line is all of the revenue that comes in and all of the revenue that's used for our operations at OCI is funded by the industry. And what we've really seen since 2017 up through this last fiscal year is a substantial growth in revenue during that time. I think we went from 244 million in revenue in 2017 up to, we're projecting, we don't have the final numbers for fiscal year 22, but we're projecting just over 300 million in revenue. I mean, that's a substantial growth in just a short amount of time. And what that means is whatever amount, so the premium taxes go straight to the general fund, fire tax dues go straight to the fire departments, etc. But whatever's left over that doesn't go to our budget for us to, fulfill our operations just gets lapsed to the general fund. And that amount that we've seen the lapse just in the last 2 years from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 22 has increased almost $10 million, all from industry funds. So, when the governor's budget comes out in a couple of weeks, I'm anticipating to see some additional positions that we requested and the corresponding expenditure authority for those positions. And the thing we like to highlight is the funding we're requesting for that expenditure authority is all from this revenue that's coming in from the industry.
So basically, the industry is paying for its own regulation.
Exactly.
Senator Hutton, you had a question?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. I think that takes many years. Appreciate the discussion I also as well about talk to those citizens, you know, you a little bit. Just high level, when we look at the constant compared to other states, where do you agree with Johnson regulatory and licensing environment for this area of insurance? And what are you hearing from the business community within the industry, like the DNC, her other has to be where are we competitive with Johnson in terms of where our regulatory environment is for the insurance industry, as well as the licensing requirements of that, and just kind of speak to that high level for us.
Sure, I think I understood that. You're breaking up a little bit.
In the committee, it was very broken up. But I think Nathan, did you catch the majority of that?
I think I got the gist of it. So I would say, and I think most people in the industry would agree that Wisconsin currently and historically has a very strong reputation among the states as a well-regulated market. And I think that's the evidence bears that out in the fact that, like I said, we're a top 5 state. I mean, Wisconsin's we're not one of the biggest states in terms of population, but we're a top 5 states for the number of domicile companies here and the total number of companies that do business here. And when you look at that industry growth, that's reflected in the charts and in the testimony, we wouldn't have added 210 new licensed entities in the state and 44,000 new agents over the last 4 or 5 years if they didn't feel like this is a good place to do business. So I feel like those numbers really reinforce that, Wisconsin is a good place where companies want to stay, want to relocate, want to grow their business. And anecdotally, when I attend conferences with my colleagues from around the country, We often hear accolades from other states and from industry that, we are seen as a very well-regulated market, and our agency overall is seen as an agency that industry can work well with. I would say we have an open door policy. We encourage companies and agents to come to us early if there are any problems, so we can work them through on the front end. We want to have a good relationship, but we'll also take action when we need to. But we feel like that open door policy and having open lines of communication has served us well. And we're also, I guess, the last thing I'll say is, again, it's in the graphs. We are one of the lowest cost states from a regulation standpoint. When you look at, our neighboring states, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, we are the lowest per domicile unit, our agency budget. So if you take, total number of domicile companies divided by our budget, we're the lowest among all of our neighbors. And when you also look at our budget per $1,000 of premium, even though over the last 4 or 5 years, our budget has been increasing slightly, as a percentage of $1,000 of premium, because there's been so much growth of the industry, it's actually been decreasing. So we are historically a lean agency, and we continue to be lean. And frankly, part of the concern is we're starting to get a little too lean, to the point where, as I said, we're having concerns that we're not going to be able to fulfill our responsibilities and meet the timelines that we need to meet for reviewing filings and such.
Senator Hutton, follow up?
Great, thank you for pitching your report forward. You did well in interpreting the questions, so.
Thanks, Rob. Senator Jaglor.
When it comes to so one of the things you mentioned about complaints and regulation and follow-up. It's been steady. Where has it been an increase? Where are we at when it comes to actually looking into the enforcement of issues with some bad actors?
So last year, I know we recovered just over $7.8 million in recoveries for consumers. And we closed just over 2,600 total complaints. And in total, we had just under 18,000 contacts that came into our office that we responded to. So it's not all the contacts we get are complaints.
Sure.
We also encourage people, if they just have general inquiries, if there's something, kind of a FAQ sheet we can provide. So we do get a number of those, but of the contacts that were specific complaints, there was 2,679 actually that we resolved. We recognize it's not always policy holder might not love how we resolve it, but we look into it, we see if there's a violation of the law. If there was, we'll go after the company or the agent. And sometimes if there's not, we have to tell the complainant that the company didn't do anything wrong. But when there is, when there's a situation where we can take action and there is a violation of the law, we will take action.
Any other questions for Secretary Designee? Nathan, I'd like to say thank you for coming in and for taking the time to review before our committee. And now I'm going to read the many registrations so that we have to read them into the. So first off, I have Zach Madden from the governor's office registering in favor. Jeremy Levin, Rural Wisconsin Health Cooperative, registering in favor. Mike Hop, SFM Mutual, registering in favor. Dawn Lemke, Church Mutual, registering in favor. Eva Wallstrom, Schreiber Group, information only. RJ Perot, Alliance of Health Insurances, registering in favor. Ben Van Pelt, SSM Health, registering in favor. John Cronin, Century Insurance, registering in favor. Robin Crossan, Navitus, in favor. Andy Engel, WPS Health Insurance, registering in favor. Natalie White, PIA of Wisconsin Professional Insurance Agents, registering in favor. Tim Lundquist, Wisconsin Association of Health Plans, registering in favor. Andy Franken, Wisconsin Insurance Alliance, registering in favor. Jess Alanis, Travelers, registering in favor. Misha Lee, Independent Insurance Agents of Wisconsin, registering in favor. Brian Maddie, Molina Healthcare, registering in favor. Brian Kleva, Northwestern Mutual, registering in favor. Connie O'Connell, Wisconsin Council of Life Insurers, registering in favor. Matt Wimmer, Bellin Gunderson Health System, registering in favor. Elizabeth Quartz, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, registering in favor. In addition to that, Senator Tim Carpenter registering in favor. So with that, we're going to be adjourning the hearing. Our office will be in touch with you as far as when we will hold a vote on this. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance, and we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.